Hello, I'm Esteban Olivares. I'm Dean of Academics and Head of New University Partnerships with Summer Discovery and Summer Institute for the Gifted, and happy to be here today with Ideagen TV. We have today Brad Cawn, author of the book Ambitious Instruction. He's a teacher, educator, researcher, and trainer. He specializes in helping schools and teachers integrate ambitious teaching and learning. I think the work that Brad is doing within education and research has a profound impact on our school systems, teachers, and students in the classroom. So, Brad, before we dive into the conversation, can you talk a bit about yourself and talk to our audience about who you are?
I think you did a pretty good job of providing an overview, but I'll just reiterate and say I've spent a bulk of my career in education and development focused on how to develop teaching and learning at scale. And when I say that, I don't just mean the number of people who are impacted by that support, but also the ability to do it at what I would say is the most granular and therefore the hardest level, which would be a daily instruction in a classroom or on-the-job learning in a organizational or corporate setting. So in pursuing that work, that's taken me from leading professional development at Chicago Public Schools, where I'm based. I've designed teacher preparation programs at the post-secondary level, and including for Teach for America. I've led research for the Gates Foundation, and now I'm doing quite a bit of work in the corporate sector, where I work primarily with energy and utility companies on what's being called workforce transformation, which I think is sort of a catch-all for how you prepare a workforce for the future of work, which involves, a sort of a lightning quick adaptability as well as dealing with automation and emerging technologies. So Esteban noted, I have one most recent publication is a book called Ambitious Instruction. I've also published a number of other books, and I have another one on teaching entrepreneurship coming out later this year. And then I work very closely with Esteban actually at Summer Discovery as a curriculum advisor, and I want to highlight some of the cool work we're doing, which includes a metaverse course that is coming out this summer that I think will be a game changer.
Yeah, we're excited about that course and just excited about working with you because you bring so many innovative ideas and help us kind of take education to that next level.
Thank you.
So the work that you do across school districts and corporations, company, industry, I can only imagine that cross-sector collaboration and partnerships are critical to delivering quality education, whether it's with elementary, high school, workforce. What are your thoughts on cross-sector collaboration?
Yeah, for me, it's been really heartening to watch sort of the evolution or progress of such collaboration. It's really matured from what I think was a long time, a kind of a marriage of convenience, something that was functioned as a tax break or a good PR for a company or organization. And I think it moved in recent years to a necessity or even kind of a desperation, with all this talk about would there be enough talent out there? And how do we do something to prepare talent to something I think that is emerging as a more strategic approach in that partnership. And I think there's been a real focus on aligning systems to ensure both efficacy and equity. And I think both things now are finally at top of mind. And I would highlight an example of that for your audience. And that is about a year or two ago, right before the pandemic, I worked with a electric utility here, a power company in the Midwest on repositioning and sort of auditing their STEM education portfolio. In other words, what programs and resources were they supporting or involved in or sponsoring? And one of the things I was really struck by was their eagerness to sort of move beyond these kinds of one-offs like science fairs and single-day lessons on solar power or what have you, to something more embedded and coherent, and really focusing on building school-to-career pipelines. And I was really excited about that, right? That sort of that horizon perspective that I think has really been lacking in these sort of partnerships in previous years. And so I just highlight about that work in particular is that one of the things we did is we ended up partnering with a local school district on creating sort of a pre-collegiate, pre-professional pathway for electrical engineering, right? So really focused not only just on aspects of green energy and emerging technologies and renewable resources, but also sort of highlighting the skills necessary to go work at a utility or to work in electrical engineering. And so that was a really exciting outcome. I think that's a more sustainable, more comprehensive approach. And so I always say moving forward, my litmus test, my smell test for that kind of partnership is, are you really asking for adults or professionals in the community just to sort of do a drive-by as a guest speaker at a school? Or are you asking them to come and roll up their sleeves and work side by side by kids? Because I think really, honestly, what we want is, and what kids really want is not an adult telling them what to do with their lives, but to be a thought partner who's willing to take their ideas seriously and help the kids realize them.
Definitely, definitely. I think helping the learner and be a partner with the learner to understand, what's possible, where can they go, where can they take this experience, apply it to real world situations is important. So we're here to also talk about the SDGs. So SDG number 4, quality education. Prior to the pandemic, worldwide there was gains in literacy. We've lost a lot of those gains over the last 2 years. And as we think about how do we imagine solving these 17 SDGs into 2030, literacy is going to be an important aspect. And how do we gain back what we lost? So what are some innovative frameworks that can help guide our thinking as we address quality education and literacy?
The question raises the point about how inextricably linked education is to a just and democratic world, right? And the consequences of not providing that. And so for me, when I hear the term just and democratic world, I think to myself, well, we also need a just and democratic education to create that. And I think, I'll be honest, I feel like we're really lacking frameworks that help illuminate what that is. But I do want to single out one, because I think in particular it's really unsung. And that is several years ago, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, a group of social studies experts created what was called the C3 framework. It stands for college, career, and civic life. And these are a set of learning standards. And I'm sure those in the audience have seen endless numbers of learning standards for state, local, national, et cetera. And I highlight these. They're social studies centered, but I feel like what they do really well is they speak really clearly to the role of inquiry, participation, collaboration, and empathy, not only just to like social studies, but to general development, et cetera. I would highlight those things as just and, a just and democratic education. So even if you have nothing to do with social studies, or civics or character education, et cetera, I look at them really because they're just a great example of how to articulate what it means to be like a meaningful citizen or meaningful participant, even at the primary grades, in the context of education, right? How do you actually demonstrate empathy if you're an 8th grader, for instance? I do want to say too, I feel like the idea of frameworks themselves are really critical, and it's so critical that we actually share these sort of adult ideas with our learners. Frameworks are guideposts, they're ways, they're lens, if you will, by which we see the world. And I think we owe it to students to look at the the multitude of complex ways we need to see the world in order to match its complexity. And so, you take a great example is the SDGs. Even a pre-adolescent really could use the SDGs to analyze a local issue or an internal school problem as well, and they should, and they're tools. And I think they're scaffolds, and I think they're really important scaffolds. And I think it comes down to what's the right way to present those tools to kids, but I think they should be presented to kids.
Exactly. And I love how you talked about the frameworks and using words like empathy, collaboration, innovation. One of the buzzwords right now, and there's a lot of frameworks out there, is 21st century skills.
Sure.
Skills development. But at the same time, how do we kind of balance, providing skills and creativity and innovation along with characteristic values like kindness and compassion?
Mm-hmm.
So why are all these important to teaching and curriculum development and design of curriculum?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're everything, right? I think, we're finally moving away from this 19th century notion that the goal of education is to make someone well-rounded or knowledgeable about a set of subject matter, right? Really what matters now most is intellectual flexibility and adaptability. That's why you hear people use words like grit and resilience, et cetera, and why you see such a focus on problem solving, right? So it's really not a surprise to me at all if you look at like survey items of teachers against survey items of, say, employers and corporations, and they say the exact same thing when they're asked about what it is their people should learn, and it's always critical thinking, it's always resilience, it's always problem solving. I think the challenge both in a corporate or organizational setting and even in the school setting is that a term like leadership is an abstract noun, right? We all know what it means if we were to ask ourselves, what's the definition of leadership? And I think plenty have probably done research and identified individual traits of it, but it's What's really challenging is articulating what it means to demonstrate leadership at say 10 versus like 16, right? And so that's not to say that like we necessarily need to teach leadership or creativity the same way across all classrooms and all students. But the thing that I think would be most helpful, it's most critical in designing curriculum to address these things is really um, is having a really clear idea about what it looks like to do the work inside content learning or inside formal education. And I think to tie it back to ideas about cross-sector collaboration, this is so where those pipelines and those partnerships are so critical, right? If we have a sense of what it is that is competent or excellent work at the professional level, we can collaborate, across the grade levels, across contexts, across ages, to collaborate on what those skills could look like in a grade appropriate way.
I love how you talk about doing the work. In a previous conversation, Sharon Hildebrand from Hitachi Solutions talked about not just raising awareness, but actually how to do. And that really thinking about what we're doing with our innovative curriculum, that's what we're asking students to do, is to solve the real world problems. But also a lot of your work is about innovation and thought leadership. In your latest book, Ambitious Instruction, you're kind of challenging those of us in education to redefine the word rigor.
Mm-hmm.
So you introduced this concept of teaching ambitiously with a focus on problem-based learning. And I think that kind of ties into that doing. So as we work with youth, how important is ambitious teaching and problem-based learning to help students solve real-world problems like the SDGs?
Yeah. First, I want to say it's funny to me. Innovation is fast becoming sort of the rigor of the 2020s, right? It's sort of a overhyped word, but it's underdefined at the same time. And so, my response to that about what innovative teaching is or ambitious teaching is if to go back to the 21st century skills piece, if we want to instill those traits in our young learners, traits like creativity, for instance. We're going to have to utilize sort of a special kind of teaching, the kind that isn't just sort of like, well, I hope this instills in kids a sense of creativity, but actually, makes lasting contributions towards it, even if that is indirectly, which a lot of teaching ends up being. So for me, like, just to highlight really quickly, in the book, Ambitious Instruction, I'm spelling out a bunch of the methods involved in doing that kind of teaching that allows teachers to teach for innovation or teach for creativity. And those are things like Esteban said, problem-based learning. One thing I highlight quite a bit is multi-source synthesis, which I think is the source of really all intellectual engagement at the college and professional level. And I can talk about that in another setting, of course, or it's in the book as well. But, one feature I'd really honestly highlight is I think so critical to ambitious teaching, which is something I think anybody in the room can think about, and really exemplifies the notion of innovation. In a way I want to highlight, I think it exemplifies innovation in a way that I think is different than the way the term is sometimes used in corporate settings. When it's used now often is sort of synonymous with digital transformation, which is to say automating or digitizing aspects of work to make them more efficient. And I think actually what we mean here in innovating is, problem solving in a way that meets a variety of people's complex and individualistic needs, right? And one of the ways that I really advocate for is what I would call practicing students as sense makers. And an easier term for that is probably listening, right? And what I mean by that is, and a radical and innovative thing we can do is also sort of the simplest thing we can do, which is we can really privilege students' ideas or learner ideas, however formative or fledgling they may be, and make instruction sort of built around eliciting and engaging those ideas. That's the core of everything I do, is really having this radical interest in student ideas. And I realize that kind of isn't a sexy pedagogy, so to speak, but I really think it sets the table for all the innovation that comes, right? That's how you engage in inquiry. That's how you create a positive learning environment. That's how you integrate ed tech or any kind of technology, is you're really thinking, through and for what students can produce their thinking. So that I think that's the most ambitious thing anybody can do. And I think the practices, the methods come out of that, though my book describes many of them, I will say.
And that focus of providing the foundation for the students to do and to solve a problem, but also I think we're kind of creating that foundation for the future leaders. A lot of the conversation earlier today was also about purpose in corporations, purpose in organizations.
Yep.
I've been in higher education my entire life, in education. I wake up every morning because I feel my purpose is helping to educate those future leaders. I say that the future leaders of tomorrow, they're in the classroom of today. Organizations like Ideagen, I've worked with them as well, and we're developing some amazing curriculum. They've done 2 courses this past summer online, Future Global Leaders Academy, and they really help the students to solve real world problems. Think about the 17 SDGs. What advice do you have for anyone taking on this task of, not just raising awareness, but also doing and teaching and helping youth to become, the architects of that framework to solve, future problems?
Yeah, I think it's putting them in front of students, and I think it's not having the hesitancy to do so. And I mentioned earlier the importance of sharing frameworks with students, and that's anything from the SDG to, and I'm going to say something controversial, including CRT as well, about putting the ideas of the world in front of students. And I can't think of a better one to use as a set of criteria and guideposts, even with, I would say, middle school students, than the SDGs, right? I think students are uniquely interested in these areas and issues. And I'm not saying that anecdotally. We actually have a lot of evidence that suggests that adolescents not only are very invested in a lot of the issues that make up the SDGs, they're sort of uniquely situated to solve this, not only because of their passion, their engagement, because actually their worldview at that stage is much more inclined to address these sort of wicked or hard challenges than adults sometimes are. But to me, it's like using it as a framework allows them to assess and engage in real world issues and problems, I think, better than it really anything at this point. And I think it's both like a launching pad and as a guidepost, like I said, to engage in that work at the local or school level.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think this whole conversation has been really amazing. Helped me to remind myself as well what my purpose and what I love to do, working with you, working with Ideagen, creating these amazing courses to really develop those future leaders. So as we wrap up, so if someone wanted to connect with you and find out more about ambitious instruction, what's the best way to find out a little bit?
Yeah. The book's on Amazon, available through my publisher as well. But what I would say is I would love to, if anybody's interested in particularly in what do we mean by rigor? What do we mean by ambitious instruction? And really sort of setting that table for what it means for practice, please email me. It's my name, bradcawn@gmail.com. I'll send you the first chapter. I'd love for you to read it. I'd love your feedback. Love your questions and wonderings about how to put it to use. And the rest of the book does do that. But if you're looking for the big picture about what all these terms mean, I'm happy to share my thought leadership on that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Well, Brad, kind of the last question. Of the 17 SDGs, is there one that personally speaks to you and kind of calls out to you? And what's your kind of call to action to our audience of what they can be doing?
Yeah. So my background and even now I'm a systems guy, and for me, I've lived most of my career in SDG 16 and 17. Really under the understanding you can't really address the needs and issues of the other SDGs without good systems and structures in place. And so, just to I'm a broken record, but just to go back to that cross-sector partnership, and the key piece of it is, that's a partnership in terms of the technical expertise or the resources of the external partner combined with the system of whether it's the institution, the public governance, et cetera, combine those two things working together. That's how you address these issues in sustainable ways, is that strength of partnership of addressing both the need and the solution combined with the systems approach to doing so.
Wow, just amazing, wonderful. Thank you, Brad Cawn, and we're definitely looking forward to future conversations.
Yeah, thanks, guys.